Before Titanic became a name known around the world, she was a construction project on the edge of Belfast. Steel, timber, rivets, cranes, and thousands of skilled hands building one of the largest moving objects ever made. This is the timeline of RMS Titanic, from keel laying to launch, at the Harland and Wolff Shipyard in Belfast, Northern Ireland. The story begins with ambition. White Star Line wanted a new class of ocean liner. Not just fast, but vast, elegant, and powerful. Harland and Wolff, closely linked with White Star, would build the ships at Queen's Island in Belfast, where the yard had the space, workforce, and engineering experience for work on this scale. Titanic was built alongside her sister ship, Olympic. To make that possible, Harland and Wolff transformed the yard itself. Existing slipways were cleared and combined into a giant building area. Above them rose the Arrol Gantry, a massive steel framework of cranes, platforms, and walkways. It was not the ship, but it made the ship possible, a construction machine built around the hulls as they grew. Titanic's keel was laid on March 31st, 1909. A keel laying was more than ceremonial. It was the starting line. The keel formed the ship's backbone, the long central structure from which the rest of the hull would take shape. From that first line of steel, Titanic would rise piece by piece. At first, there was no grand silhouette, no recognizable liner. There were plates, beams, ribs, and metal sections set with exacting precision. The work demanded heavy industry and fine measurement. Shipbuilders shaped steel plates, drilled holes, lifted sections into position, and fastened them together with rivets. Riveting was one of the defining sounds of the yard. Teams worked in rhythm, heating rivets, passing them, placing them, and hammering them tight. Each rivet helped bind the hull into a single structure. The process was loud, difficult, and physically demanding, but it was essential to shipbuilding in this period. Through 1909, Titanic's lower structure expanded across the slipway. Her double bottom, internal framing, and lower hull sections began to reveal the scale of the vessel. Workers were not simply building an outer shell. Inside the hull, they were creating a framework of compartments, decks, supports, and spaces that would later hold machinery, cargo, crew areas, and passenger accommodations. By 1910, the ship's size was impossible to ignore. The hull climbed higher above the yard, and the sweep of Titanic's bow and stern began to appear. The work was still structural. Frames, bulkheads, shell plating, deck beams, and thousands of connections turning separate parts into one ocean-going body. This stage required coordination on a huge scale. Designers, draftsmen, foremen, platers, riveters, crane operators, carpenters, and laborers all had roles in the timeline. Materials had to arrive when needed, sections had to fit. Work in one part of the hull affected work elsewhere. Titanic was not assembled by one craft alone, but by an entire industrial system. As the months passed, the ship rose inside the gantry like a steel cliff. The slipway had to support the growing weight. The cranes above had to move heavy components into place. Workers on the hull operated at height, exposed to weather, noise, and danger. The finished liner would later be associated with luxury, but its construction began in grit, heat, and steel. By early 1911, Titanic's hull was nearing completion for launch. She was not a finished ship. A launch is not the end of construction. It is the moment when a hull is ready to leave the slipway and enter the water, so fitting out can continue afloat. Engines, boilers, funnels, interiors, electrical systems, and countless details still required major work. Launching a vessel of this size required its own preparation. Timber ways, grease, and supporting structures were readied so the hull could move safely from land to water. The event had to be timed and controlled. Once the ship began to slide, the forces involved were enormous. On May 31st, 1911, Titanic was launched at Belfast. Crowds gathered to witness the sight. Harland and Wolff workers, officials, and spectators watched as the great hull moved down the ways and entered the water for the first time. In just over 2 years, Titanic had gone from a keel on a slipway to a floating hull. The launch marked a milestone, not completion. The ship still had to be fitted out before she could become a working liner for White Star Line. But the construction timeline from March 31st, 1909 to May 31st, 1911 shows the immense achievement of the Belfast shipyard. Planning, labor, engineering, and scale brought brought together in steel.